How many more paedophiles will be allowed to survive and indeed thrive at the BBC before we say enough? Shut down this corrupt and jaded organisation that shames Britain. Huw Edwards, Star News announcer who announced the death of the late Queen, wasn't the first. This is how he'll be remembered now. But I remember that the BBC's previous biggest star, Jimmy Savile, the UK's most prolific paedophile ever, was also shielded by the corporation, this time until after his death. There was a paedophile ring operating at the BBC for decades. We know that. And when Jill Dando tried to blow the whistle on it, guess what? She was murdered. And her killer has to this day never been convicted. So while what happened today would be a seismic moment for any other organisation, for the BBC, it was just another day, as its flagship 1 PM bulletin, hosted many times by Edwards himself in the past, kicked off with breaking news about themselves.
Today at 1, Huw Edwards has just been given a suspended 6-month prison sentence for making indecent photographs of children as young as 7. Police have released this picture of the former BBC presenter after he was charged. Westminster Magistrates Court heard this morning he paid hundreds of pounds to a convicted paedophile after being sent pornographic images. His barrister said Huw Edwards is truly sorry and knows he has betrayed people's trust and faith.
Yes, after a morning in court over the last few moments, we've just heard that 63-year-old Huw Edwards has been given a 6-month jail sentence, suspended for 2 years with a requirement to complete a sex offender programme.
We'll have more details from the court in the programme. Also,
now, if the BBC was a private company, it would be shuttered by now, finished, over, done with. It should be. Can we stop kidding ourselves, please, that we should be proud of this degenerate organisation? I mean, of course, the BBC has already been pumping out its own propaganda, like this from its media editor, Katie Razzle, today, assuring us Edwards is the criminal, not the BBC, although some suspect he is being used as a way to bash the corporation for ideological reasons. As one serious insider put it to me with a heavy dose of sarcasm, at the end of the day, it's always the BBC's fault. Are you actually serious? Piss off. Save your bullshit today. You are despicable. And in two-tier Britain, of course Huw Edwards was never going to go to prison for possessing images showing the most stomach-churning activities on young children. But under our truly skewed justice system, Julie Sweeney, the grandmother of 3 and pensioner carer for her husband, and Lucy Connolly, the housewife of a Conservative councillor, are rotting behind bars as we speak for sending one Facebook and one X post respectfully in the wake of the Southport massacre. Please, someone make that make sense. Well, it doesn't. And that's why I want to share with you this very human reaction from Lalani Dowdeen, our superstar panellist who will be here tomorrow.
I don't have children, but I think they are the most important things in the world. They are the most important things. So when someone has pictures of children being raped and then they don't spend a single day in jail, I don't understand how that's justice. And I'm really upset because, like I said, I think children are the most important things in the world. And I'm angry, and that's why I'm crying. I'm so angry because it's frustration, and it's like, what can we do? What can we do about it? When we don't have a justice system, when they'll lock people, like you go out and you protest and you get angry or you make threats against paedophiles, they'll come and lock you up. They'll come and lock you up for saying something. There are people sitting in jail because of Facebook posts right now. like literally sitting in jail for 2 years, 3 years. Some of the people that follow me, and this fucking guy has got off, and the people that sent him, the person that sent him the pictures has got off. Are we going to protect the children?
I feel your pain and your anger and disgust, Alani. I'm sure millions more do across Britain. Thank you for that honesty. Meanwhile, in two-tier UK, it's now acceptable to be racist, as long as you are a non-white person racially attacking another non-white person. Follow me on this, because it is the sickening conclusion after Mariha Hussein from High Wycombe was cleared after holding this sign at a pro-Palestinian rally, branding Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak as coconuts. This is what happened according to Channel 4.
For these protesters, Mariha Hussein is a symbol of free speech. The former teacher had been charged with committing a racially aggravated offence for her placard depicting Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman as coconuts. But today in court, she was found not guilty.
It goes without saying that this ordeal has been agonising for my family and I. Instead of enjoying my pregnancy, I've been vilified in the media, I've lost my career, I've been dragged through the court system in what can only be described as a politically motivated show trial.
Now, Mariha, I am told, had been inspired by an exchange between me and Narinder Kaur on my former GB News show, which you'll see right now, and you'll also see that I made it completely clear at the time that I was disgusted by what I viewed as out-and-out racism.
Narinder, I just want to put something to you. Is it true? Is it true? Is it true that you said that while you wouldn't use the C word, you would actually use another C word to describe Rishi Sunak?
I would have said he's a bit of a coconut.
Explain what that means.
So that means I get called. It's not racist. If a brown people would call me that sometimes.
Explain what it means.
So what it means is you are brown on the outside, white on the inside, like a bounty. Yeah, it's like the Bounty chocolate bar. So I often get called that by other Indian people, and I don't mind that.
But you're going to call Rishi Sunak that?
Oh, Rishi Sunak is a coconut.
Okay, well, I'm going to put. I'm going to say to you immediately, Narinder, that is hugely racist, because what you are saying
is racist.
And sadly, after the ruling, that sort of language might now become commonplace, especially with the Conservative peer Baroness Warsi immaturely celebrating the ruling by posting a picture of herself drinking from a coconut. Now, the Reform UK chairman Zia Youssef wasn't having any of that. He responded by saying, "So turns out being racist to Sunak and Braverman is not a crime. District Judge Vanessa Lloyd has effectively declared open season on ethnic minority politicians who reject far-left dogma. The left's real racism goes unpunished. Proof hate speech laws are a political weapon." And he added, referring to Warsi, the former chair of the Conservative Party, celebrating the smearing of Sunak and Braverman as coconuts. She is still a Tory peer. What a farce of a party. Now, Warsi responded by saying, "Good to see you have found your voice on the issue of racism. Not sure where you were when your Reform Party volunteers were smearing migrants, Muslims, minorities, and calling Sunak an effing P-word." But Zia's response sums up where the UK is now when it comes to two-tier justice. He said, "Everyone at Reform condemns racism. You are on here promoting it. Now we all see what you really stand for. Your entire career howling racist was projection." Now, I take no joy in saying this, but the failure to jail Huw Edwards or find Mariha Hussein guilty of racism shows our society is crumbling. It seems only the white working classes will be punished for going against the narrative. These are dangerous times. Now let me bring in today's superstar panel. And two returning superstars today, I'm delighted to be joined by Charlie Downs. He is the content lead at the Centre for Migration Control and a political strategist. And also, we actually saw him there alongside me trying to deal with Narinder Kaur, so he's a long-time guest of mine back on GB News as well. David Campbell, Bannerman, chairman of the Freedom Association, and so much more. So, Charlie Downs, a day of shame for the British Bashing Corporation, but also surely a day of shame for the UK. Charlie, when a man like Huw Edwards escapes jail and the court seems to care much more about his mental health than the fact that his activities encourage the most sickening paedophilia of young children aged between 7 and 9 years old. Meanwhile, you can be locked up for 18 months for posting a tweet.
Yeah, well, if there's one thing that is abundantly clear now, and this, the whole thing of the two-tier policing has become quite mainstream and quite popular recently, but it's been the case for a long time. The regime that governs Britain, from the Conservatives to this Labour one and earlier, the way that it operates, it doesn't operate on principles. The only principle that it operates on is power. It rewards its friends and it punishes its enemies. And that really at bottom is how all politics works. It's just our system is particularly explicit in that, because who else do we know who have essentially gotten away with the worst sorts of crimes, paedophilia, rape, and so on for years? Well, it's the grooming gangs up and down the country. And why is that the case? It's because, in the most perverse possible way, the power structure that governs us views that group, i.e. immigrants, as clients and as political friends and as being worthy of protection. Whereas the white native population of Britain is viewed as an enemy, which is why you see white working class people locked up for Facebook posts, but elite, high-level, state-adjacent figures like Huw Edwards essentially getting off scot-free. And at the same time, you see people of the lowest order, people who are not from Britain who have come here and raped young girls, also get off scot-free. And it's because those people belong to the same category, which is they are friends or clients of the power structure.
Yeah, I totally agree. Very, very terrifying, isn't it, David Campbell Bannerman? But David, what about the BBC's response today? How dare they, on a day of shame for that organisation, be publishing a piece trying to say, oh, this is just going to be used by people like me for ideological reasons? I mean, if this was a company, they would be closed long ago, David. I remember their moral outrage when I was working at the News of the World, for example, which was shuttered over phone hacking. Now, how does the BBC continue to get off scot-free when clearly it has a major problem with paedophilia? But first, it's the best time of year because football's back. We're talking Premier League in the UK and in the US, NFL Sundays and college football Saturdays. With that comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineups, which is where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV, making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the person that everyone ridicules in the group chat, which is always me. But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench, because let's be honest, no one wants to fumble their grooming routine. That's where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue ear and nose hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that'll keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. It will help you feel clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster with precise trimming capabilities. It's reliable, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. No one wants a surprise ear or nose hair making a guest appearance on game day, so the Weed Whacker 2.0, I love the name of that, handles these details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming gang. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't stop at grooming essentials. It also comes with 2 free gifts today: the Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag, premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by heading over to www.manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken today for 20% off and free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. So let me just repeat, 20% off and free shipping with the code Outspoken at checkout. All you need to do is head to www.manscaped.com. Stay on top of your grooming game and be ready for anything the season throws your way.
Well, you make a good point, Dan, and I think it's the way the BBC is managed or not managed, actually. I don't know who really runs it. I think the chairman kind of floats above it, really, and his team, and does other things. It's the editorial control, I think, is the big problem. They did report today with Huw Edwards. I mean, he got Category A charges against him, which is 7 counts of penetrative sex of someone who was 7 to 9 aged. I mean, that is really appalling. And is this a light sentence? It does seem to be honest. And this is the face of the BBC News, of course, for many years. So that's outrageous. But I would say what is really outrageous is the Rotherham sex scandal. You know, there was no reporting in this depth last week about the charges into that. And this has been ignored and overlooked. And there is some very odd decision making going on about what we're allowed to see and what we're not allowed to see, and the depth of reporting behind it, which really does need investigating. I mean, investigating, because it is scandalous.
Yeah, and when it came to the so-called rioters, and I say so-called rioters, by the way, because there's still a lot about these riots which is emerging, like, for example, the Asian man who we found out last week was actually posing as a white man to stoke up lots of the conflict in Southport. So I say so-called riots, but the BBC and other mainstream media organisations, Charlie Downs, was lining up to cover them being jailed for, in some cases, up to 9 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising because, again, the BBC is marketed as being an unbiased and neutral media outlet, but they aren't, and everyone has known that for a great many years at this point. I heard just today, actually, I was sitting listening to BBC News for my sins, and they were covering Keir Starmer visiting Italy and speaking to Giorgia Meloni. And before they even started the story, they made sure to note that Giorgia Meloni has links to fascist organizations and in her youth was involved with neo-fascist groups and this sort of thing. And it's like, well, you know, you don't sort of note that, for example, someone like Keir Starmer was involved in essentially communist activism when he was a young man.
Yeah, exactly. Or was actually advocating for Jeremy Corbyn, an extremist, to be prime minister for years.
Exactly. And that is because, once again, the power structure that governs us, and the BBC and the entire media actually is part of that power structure, exists to punish its enemies and reward its friends. And Keir Starmer and the Labour government and Huw Edwards and all the rest of these people all belong to that category.
Mm-hmm. Are part of the globalist establishment, aren't they, David?
Yeah, can I just say on that? I mean, you've got people like Ed Miliband, whose father, Ralph, and we weren't allowed to mention the fact, you know, the father was a Marxist professor and all of this, who actually swore allegiance before Karl Marx in Highgate Cemetery. And now this man, Ed Miliband, is running our environmental policy disastrously. And David Miliband is running the Red Cross internationally. So, I mean, I think it's relevant, the background to the decision making.
Of course. And it was interesting, wasn't it, today, that all of a sudden Huw Edwards decided that his father was relevant. His dead father apparently was the reason behind his conviction. How despicable is that? How cretinous is that? And of course, we saw the mental health card played again, and magistrate gave it a lot of stock. Now, David, there you were sitting alongside Narinder Kaur in that clip in my digest on GB News. Now, that was the first time that I had heard that term be used in that context, certainly on TV. You saw, and you probably remember, I was very shocked by it, and I scolded Narinder. But it seems to have sparked some sort of acceptability, which now has been backed up by this court ruling that it's completely okay for leftists to attack other non-white ethnic minorities for being on the right of politics. And I just think it's out and out racism, but the courts don't agree.
Well, I think it is racist, and you were right to call her out on the sofa. I was sitting next to her on the sofa. Yeah, I mean, it's a very abusive term, and it's derogatory to white people, isn't it? Because you're white on the inside. You're really a white person, which is, of course, a bad thing in their book. And I put it on a par of, the N word is used quite openly, but only amongst certain communities that are allowed to use it. And if white people use it, they get into serious trouble. It's a horrible word that no one should use. So there are double standards. It's sort of two-tier racism is arising here. And,
no, it is.
Barrass-Wazi was a disgrace, and she's still a Tory peer. And frankly, the whip should have a serious talk about that. I think that is outrageous.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.